I also want to extend a huge thanks to their parents and families. Without their support, it's impossible to write. When my book was published at 19, I know I couldn't have done it without my parents by my side, without their unending support through the course of my literary career. So I do think that having parents who encourage you to read, who encourage you to write, who don't tell you to go do your homework when you're reading a novel. I know that this little one's boards are in 2 weeks' time, yet she is here at Jaipur Literature Festival launching her book. So this is a huge, huge accomplishment. And now let's, all of us together, launch this fantastic book that we're going to be speaking about, including Anusha's book. The house that spoke.
Just take it. Do you want to sit in the middle? Yes.
And this is Anusha's second novel, Never Gone, which has just come out
September.
in November.
November, yeah.
November, so just about a few months ago, so fantastic. So first tell me, before we start, what do your friends think of all of this? I mean, are you guys walking down the hallways of your school and everyone's like, who are these literary superstars? Do all the boys have crushes on you now? That you guys are published authors? I mean, how does this work? When you're so young, in 10th standard, and you're in what, 11th?
11th, yeah.
Like, how does this, how does this literary stardom come to play at this age?
Well, in terms of the boys, I think it's kind of the other way around because they can, well, sometimes it's a bit tough to understand what I'm saying if I'm speaking too fast or, so I don't know. Also,
So are you trying to say that boys are really dumb and they just can't understand how clever you are?
well, I mean, also, this is going to sound far more insulting than I intended to be, but I don't know, they don't really read the same kind of books, or read much in my class at least.
God, boys, did you hear that? These girls are saying that the boys don't really read as
No,
much
because just in my class, we were studying Romeo and Juliet, and as a joke, I was like, oh, spoiler alert, guys, they die at the end, and everyone was like, what? Why would you spoil that? And I was like, how could you not know that? So, unfortunately.
But what about you? What's your experience with being a literary superstar at the age of 16? This is your second novel.
I think, I think when you say you're an author, everyone just assumes that you're going to get full grades in English all the time.
Yes.
Okay, which kind of gets difficult because sometimes you just don't get it. But in terms of friends, I think I'm really glad to say that nothing much has changed on that front because they still tease me, make fun of me. In fact, I get made a lot of fun of because of this. So like if they have any speeches to write, they'll be like, okay, Anusha, do it. Why would I do it when I have you as a friend? Things like that.
So they make you do your English homework.
Yeah,
Is that what
I
you're
do
saying?
it. I get bullied. Like I do it. Yeah. So they all are really proud of me, and that's nice because they don't have to say it too often for me to know it, and it's good that they haven't changed as such because you might be an author, but at the end of the day, it's nice to come back to people who just think you're normal.
Normal meaning like I would correct them in some sentences. They go, "Oh, excuse us." And I'm like,
Yeah.
And what have you guys had to compromise on? So you have your pre-boards in about 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
You're here in Jaipur. You're attending all the parties. This one is attending all the parties. Okay, she's getting prepared for her future literary career. How does what is that you compromise on when you're? Is it your school? Is it athletics? Is it your schoolwork? Do you bunk school a lot? Does the book give you a pass to bunk classes?
honestly, yes, sometimes it does. What in terms of what it costs? Probably biology because because in Mumbai we have a launch on the 8th, which is the most exciting thing, and on 9th I have history and biology, so that's fabulous. But yeah, in terms of the fact that it must be an achievement to be here, even though I have boards in 2 weeks, I hope Cambridge IGCSE sees it the same way.
Yeah. But is it that you have to? Is it Anisha? Why don't you take that? is it that your friends are at the bar? Do they go to the bar? I don't think so. You guys are
No,
too
not
young.
yet.
Okay, fine, not yet.
Not yet.
But are your friends socializing, going to movies on the weekends, and you guys are sitting and writing? Is that what it is? I mean, what is the largest compromise that you've had to make? Is it academics that takes a toll? Is it your family life? What is it? For all the young aspiring writers here to know what it really takes, what the kind of compromise you have to make to write a book and to get published.
Quite honestly, I think I wrote the book in a very good time in my life because, although I wrote this book in 10th, it wasn't so hard, and honestly, I haven't compromised academics. I haven't had to compromise any social events. I haven't had to bunk school even once. That is, if I had to bunk, I would probably give that as an excuse, okay, for something else that I wanted to bunk it. Because I think I just got out of a village trip that I had to go to by saying I have something to do with my book.
I got out of the same village
Okay,
trip.
so basically
Yeah.
no one wants to go to the village trip. We can see this over here. They're like, we got out of the village trip because of the book.
I mean, I don't think, like she said, I don't think I have had to compromise on academics that much. But that's also because even before I started the book, I really did want to, get good grades, and that was already important to me. So academics haven't had, to be compromised much. But one thing that, for me, got compromised is like, I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but I'm someone that really likes to sleep in and just to sleep. And that hasn't happened in like a year and a half. So, because I write best in the morning. So I wake up in the morning and write.
What time do you wake up?
I wake up at 6.
Okay, waking up at 6.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I guess that's what has had to be compromised. And of course, like in the summer, I would keep waking up at 6 I would put myself in a really lovely room with, a view of the lake, and I would shut the door. And as the morning went on, I could hear my cousin brothers getting up and be like, let's play Mario Kart, and and I was just like, don't get out of the room, don't get out of the room. So that was definitely tough because I could hear all the fun they were having, and at various times they'd come in and they'd be like, hey, how's it can you turn the TV down? Hey, how's it going? So that was like parts of the summer and definitely some things had to be compromised, but it wasn't like a complete, everything was balanced well enough, in my case at least, thankfully. Not that I tried a lot, but to balance everything, I was just like, for a while it was just the book, definitely, because academics did definitely dip a little bit, because I was like, wait, biology, I need to do this first.
What about mathematics? Mathematics is sort of the sore
Maths.
subject of all writers and sort of the bane of everyone's existence. I still get nightmares about my 12th standard board exams till this age, okay? Till to the recurring nightmares. So is that sort of, is mathematics compromised as a writer? No? Okay, these guys are making me feel really inferior right now, okay? They wake up at 6 a.m. to write. Nothing is compromised, I mean.
So dedicated though. I'm the other way. Like I write best at night, so I would be awake till 1 and 2, and it was kind of an excuse for me to sleep late, so it wasn't really that bad for me. And my mom had to, because the book. So I could like sleep late on school nights and all of that. And honestly, for me, the book was. I think my age plays a great factor in that because I had a lot of flexibility with deadlines. So I could really take my time on the first draft, and what my editors told me was that make your first draft the best. So I did spend a lot of time on my first draft, and really flexibly, because they didn't expect me to do things on time, so that helped. So I could do it slowly, take my time with it, put it off if I had exams for a while. So that way it was I think I have my team to thank for that because they made it a really, really great journey where I didn't have to compromise actually anything.
Wow, no compromise at all.
I agree with her definitely on that front, where the team again didn't expect that much from me, but then I'm that kind of person where if I don't have a pencil before the exam, I freak out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm that kind of person, so I was like, if I don't make this deadline, it's not gonna get published. They're gonna hate me forever. So I was like really hard on myself in terms of fulfilling those deadlines.
What do you see? Do you see yourselves as writers from this day and age? Do you know for sure this is a career that you're going to pursue for the rest of your lives? Do you want to graduate and go to a college and study writing? Sort of how is it that you look at writing? Is this it? I mean, is writing it?
Well, right now, yeah, I would say that yes, I'm sure I want to be a writer, but I'm 15. I'm not even sure what I want to have for breakfast tomorrow. It could be pancakes, it could be waffles, who knows? So I don't know, you know, it might change. Maybe if we go to a college where I can sort of expose myself to many things, maybe I'll find interest in oceanology. I don't know, you know. So at this moment, yes, I'm sure of it, but that could change tomorrow.
I'm sure of the fact that I don't want to take up writing as a career.
Is it?
So yeah, I mean, writing to me is something that I like doing. It's more a hobby than something that I want to do as a career. And also, I feel like if I take it up as a career, I would probably be the kind of person who start writing something just because people want to read it and not do something that I want to write for the sake of writing. So I really doubt I'm going to take up writing as a career.
You know what? I said that to myself
Yeah.
after my first book was published, but writing draws you in.
Yeah.
You know, 2-3 books later, I came back and I said, there's nothing which is more substantial than writing. There's no other way in which I can make a larger impact through my words. And then I became a full-time writer. So
That's the good thing about writing,
so
right?
don't
I mean,
discount it. You never
can,
know.
You can take it
never
up
know.
anytime.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
But that said, I mean, what kind of training do you think went into it? Because I remember my school days, and there was very little reading that we did. It's
Yeah.
one of my largest complaints of doing my schooling here is that we never read. It was only reading, you know, those poems in those English books. And those poems, exactly. You know, those 5 poems that have been carrying on for decades and decades. I think throughout my 9th to 12th, because there was so much school curriculum involved, I had very little time to read novels
That's
or read
very
anything
true.
that I liked. And I don't think our school asked us to ever read a single book.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, you know, how important is the reading process to writing, and how have you learned to write? Did you read books to learn how to write? Did your parents teach you how to write? Did you go online, or was it like you woke up one day and it was like an epiphany and you could just write? How did it go for you?
Well, I mean, definitely you are, like, I always loved to tell stories, so definitely that aspect was always there. But it comes really with practice and with absorbing from everywhere, not really one source. You know, yes, my parents taught me some things. Yes, for example, I went to a summer school at Stanford for creative writing, and that was like, you know, amazing. But I wouldn't say that all of it came from one source. Because if you're a writer, then you're constantly looking around you and you're constantly finding things to learn and to absorb, even when, you know, you wouldn't at first think that it was there. For example, the idea for this book came from my friend, her name is Shreya, and she gets very excited about something that she thinks is aesthetically beautiful. So like she'd be like, oh my God, look at the blue sky. And I'm like, yes, we're in Mumbai, that happens. So she started telling me about this fairy tale house in London, and she was like, it's so beautiful, so beautiful. I was tuning her out completely. But then 2 weeks later, I was like, you know, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
So I guess it kind of comes from all sources to learn how to write.
And what about you?
I honestly think that reading taught me to write. But my dad is the other way. He writes too, and he doesn't read a thing. He's like bad at reading.
Anusha's father is Ravi Subramaniam. I don't know if he's in the audience, but he is also a very well-known author, and he's written several books. So a little bit of that background.
He's just bad at reading. I don't think anybody could be bad at reading, but he reads things like an assignment. So, you know, there are different people who learn to write in different ways. And about the education thing that you said, I did ICSE till my 10th, and I honestly think that education system teaches you to hate reading and writing.
It really does.
Because you learn to get marks, right? You don't really appreciate the reading, the writing, and nobody tells you to. In fact, they teach you to do. It's not in the syllabus. Okay, why is this happening? It's not in the syllabus.
And I remember even the English answers
Yeah.
that we had to be mugged up. You know, even I remember, and if you didn't mug them up
Yes.
properly, then it's like, oh, you got marks cut because you didn't write that exact sentence
Exactly.
which was in that.
And mugged up also, and it has to be the teacher has to agree with it.
Yeah.
Is it
So
not?
we had MOV. Did you do Merchant of Venice?
We got Romeo and Juliet instead, which I was really annoyed about, first of all, because I really wanted to do Merchant of Venice. But then I remember, like in 8th grade, we did The Giver. I don't know if you had that,
No.
but so Shreya, coincidentally, she was like, I think that Jonas taking his father's bicycle shows him coming into a parental role. The teacher was like, no, and that was the end of it. And she was like, but no. And by the end of that, I mean, The Giver is a really amazing book that a lot of people have loved, but by the end of that class, I was like, I hate this book so much.
Yeah.
I never want to look at it again. So I actually think we should just put a postscript in our books that says not to be used for academic purposes.
I
Just
honestly,
to make
yeah,
sure.
I honestly think that if an author wants to be loved, don't include your books in a curriculum.
Please
Because
don't.
by the end of it, everyone hates it. Because and
Really will.
like in the Merchant of Venice thing I was telling you, there was so there's a villain and there's a person that you are supposed to like. So if somebody actually sympathizes with the villain, you're not allowed to write that in your answer because
He's the
like she
villain.
said, no,
You
no.
get 0 marks
Yeah,
for
it's
loving the
actual
villain.
0. Sorry, the ICSE board doesn't like it, so you can't write that. What do you mean the ICSE board doesn't like it?
Yeah. It's so irritating. Like, just meant to think of Shylock as like, oh, he has layers,
Yeah.
his daughter, he's not been
Exactly.
treated like a fair person, but what do you have to write in the answer? He wants his bond and therefore he's a villain.
Yeah, and Shakespeare
That's it.
meant his characters to be grey, right?
Super. And okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about your books.
Yeah.
They've both written very different kinds of books. Zuni's book is fantasy, and she's had to do research. She's plumbed into a little bit of her own background.
Yeah.
As a Kashmiri, the book is set in Kashmir. It's about a house. There's actually a very nuanced, even sort of politics that you talk about in the book. It's
A little bit.
a little bit, which I can see has actually been done very well because she doesn't make it very heavy, but yet it's weaved in a very perfect way.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that I mean, if any of you actually read it, one of the things I would definitely want you to take away from it is that Kashmir is just a place. I mean, everything that's happened there after all of that, it's still just a place that humans have turned into something, oh my God, you know, there's all these politics going on, but it really is just a beautiful place in which a fantasy story could be set in. So that's one of the things.
And on that note, Zuni has prepared a short reading, so she's going to now read to us for a few minutes. Please.
Okay. I live in a fairy tale, or rather, I live in the house of a fairy tale. The great Mughals themselves could not have crafted a palace to compare with my haven of wonders, nestled away in the valley of Kashmir. The house is surrounded by shrubs and trees and is almost humble in its shy seclusion. A jade green and lavender vine exudes in thin, blushing blossoms that emerge in spring and retreat once more in autumn. The vine grows up and around the window, as though fondling it to brush away its tears at the many cracks sprinkled upon it. Beside this window, a tall, magnificent chinar stands rooted and firm against the house. Its leaves are light green, lush and verdant in spring, and then grow deeper and deeper until, by summer, their colors become vivid and rich as darkened seaweed. But it is in autumn when I like its leaves best, when they shine a glinting gold like the last flaming stars in a blackening sky. This chinar has been there for as long as I can remember. It is a friend to me. A chimney erupts almost gracefully from the tattered roof, and often smoke flies out of it, rushing to freedom. The roof itself is battered from the many beatings of rain and snow. A layer of uncut grass spreads itself out into surrounding areas, and the weeds frolic in the small garden of olive green. The garden extends past our thin fence into the trees of pine and chinar, all the way up to those mountains over there. Often, I wonder if I will climb them someday. The house is made entirely of redwood, except for the chimney, which is brick. The door waits upon the frail doorstep, cordial and respectful. The house is poised, modest, meek, and bashful, almost afraid of the brash and brazen houses that swagger beyond the many trees that surround it. The tranquil atmosphere envelops the house, wafting through the door and settling with a sigh upon the furniture. The furniture, quiet and mellow, is made of the finest chinar wood and highly polished. It is cleanly cut and timeless, giving a mythical feel to the house. My great-grandfather carved much of it himself, they tell me. The immaculate carpet, faded yet soft and warm, sleeps upon the well-worn floor and muffles your footsteps, as if to say that silence is golden, which is why not a sound echoes throughout the house. The walls are smooth and warm and keep me inside their cozy folds, comforting me when the rest of the world seems black. The windows invite the rays of light to burst through them. They are, however, not as large as they believe. You can see but the occasional dapple of light upon the floor, shining through from the garden outside. The windows are only at the front of the house though. At the back, there are none, for Ma likes to say that one should always look to the future and not be stuck in the past. Sometimes I feel she says it more to herself than to me. A single desk and chair stare curiously out of the window, as aged as the rest of the furniture. Resting upon the desk is a long, feathery white quill dipped in navy ink, a prized family heirloom. The front room also holds a small cooking stove and a few mismatched cupboards stuffed with pans. I'm always careful to open them slowly, lest a pot tumble out at first chance. When the stove is lit, it immerses the room in the sharp scent of spice, the salty smell of melting butter, the sizzle of cooking meat. On the second floor, there are two small rooms. One of them is a library, or at least I like to call it one. It's what one calls a place that's filled with books. In the corner of the room is a puffy armchair with worn-out pillows that grow softer as the years go by. I bury my face in its velvety surface and bounce upon the fluffy chair, or, for the mellow Sundays, curl up with a good story and a fresh cup of keva. Broad bookshelves lean against the walls, bursting with hundreds of dusty books. Magic awaits in their worn, yellowed pages. Next to the library is a bedroom with a small cushiony bed, and an embroidered bedsheet dotted with faded chinar leaves thrown upon it. The right side is mine, and the left Ma's. Portraits of Maharajas, Ranis, Sufi saints, brave Rajkumars, and mystical creatures from old folk tales add color to the walls. The back wall is crowded with pictures of the ancient Pandits, my ancestors. The oldest one on the left is a charcoal painting, and over the years, I've surmised that it was a self-portrait. Slowly, they seep into watercolor, and then a mixture of pencil and paint. Only the four at the very end are in print. They've been in my family for ages. Tati says she doesn't want them sold. The arid room with an uncluttered bed is a sanctuary for dreams. They drift lazily around the tender bed, filling my head as I lie down to sleep at night. They nestle in every corner of the room, but mainly in the pillows. The blanket is light and gentle, a shield from the crisp air of the room. The room at the very back of the house, on the lower floor, has a small fireplace, lightly embossed with the family crest, so worn at the edges that I often run my fingers across it to make sure it's still there. But it never chips, cracks, or darkens. Ma simply shrugged when I asked her how. It must be another perk of living here. Tati has told me it is made of the finest stone, firm and strong. It has to be to have lasted something like 400 years. The crest bears two swans, which I've always imagined to be a soft, delicate pink, like an almond tree in bloom. They are embracing a third swan in their wings. I think it shows how much the family cares for each other. Ma says it shows our ancient roots and how our lineage in Kashmir goes back generations. Underneath the crest is a pile of sullen logs, sprinkled with soot and ashes. They simply lie, broken and defeated, in the hearth. When the fire is made, mainly during winter, when the world outside is a sparkling white, the flames lick the roof of the roaring fireplace. I see magic leaping inside the haven of fire. Ancient stories written long ago of heroes, monsters, and warriors come alive inside in the frosty winter, inside the gleaming fire, inside the jeweled fireplace. They are ablaze with a life inside them that I always hope to have. The fiery heat warms me from the inside, and I shut my eyes, completely focused on the fire in front of me. The tantalizing scent of flame fills the room and keeps us in silent agreement that life is beautiful and we are content. Come spring, the cherry trees are in full bloom. Their fragile blossoms are silvery and white. Ruby red roses dot the bushes, and butterflies flutter in and out of the vines that grow around the house. The nargis send their heavenly fragrance to mesmerize onlookers. The peppery smell of my mother's tomato plants are in sharp contrast. Crunchy crimson and light green apples burst through the scintillating scents of the garden. The leaves of the plants surrounding us are a vivid evergreen. They shine like newly minted silver when the clouds sprinkle water upon their crisscrossing network of roots. The hibiscus flowers are a pearl white and a blush pink, with an exquisite aroma that causes me to become lightheaded. The pine trees that lie dotted over the landscape reach upward to touch the sky, and rain needles upon the grassy floor. This is my home. It speaks to me. This is the house that takes me in when I've had enough of the world. This house is a pearl that resides in the oyster of my heart. Though all must someday waste away, and the world will someday end, this house will live on till the days vanish into ash, and time and death, brothers in arms, engulf the rest of the world. Thank you.
That was amazing. Okay, Zuni, amazing. And I just want to, point out that, these guys are so young, and to be sitting here on the stage at Jaipur Literature Festival and reading an entire portion of your book and sharing your work, it's not easy. Even till today, after 11, 12 years of doing this, I'm terrified when I get onto stage. To see these two being able to do this, to do a reading like this, it definitely takes nerves. So another huge round of applause to both of these lovely young ladies for being able to do that. It's not easy to do. Clearly, you've practiced a lot. So thank you for that. It seems to come so naturally, but to get the flow correct and to do a reading is far more difficult than it sounds or appears, or how Zuni makes it appear to be so easy. And Anusha's book is very different than Zuni. Zuni's is a fantasy novel set in Kashmir. It's about a house and darkness, and it's got a lot of mystical elements. Anusha's book is very much set in present-day urban India school life. It's a story of 5 friends, and one of who dies, and their reactions to this death. But it's a very lighthearted sort of a book, and it's very entertaining, very readable, but very different again. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your book, how you wrote it. Is it autobiographical? I know there are some elements of this. Something like this did happen in your own life. And is that really what inspired you to write it? And how much of the book is autobiographical versus sort of inspiration, as we saw with Zuni's book?
So the first thing about this, so a little bit about the book. The book is about a group of friends in high school who, they're very normal. They're normal teenagers. They study, they go out, they do a lot of that. But then suddenly when one of their friends dies, it's their entire routine, their daily lives gets upset, right? And through this book, I don't want it to be a cliched book. I want to try and, so when someone dies, when you go through that loss in your life, it's not always that you get relationships together. A lot of relationships also end up breaking because of that loss and grief in your life. And that's the thing that I've tried to show through this book. I think...
And this incident also happened in your own life?
No. It's like the characters are very, very inspired by my own life. And the characters, I think, are one of the best parts about this book, because I'm so sure that when you all read it, you all will be able to relate to, if not one, many, many more of the characters. Because there is a part of, like, there are different teenagers shown in this book where each of us will be able to relate to. And I've tried to make the characters as different from each other as possible, but also same in a way. And I think somewhere when you're writing young adult fiction, every author aspires to make the readers cry. Because that's when you know you achieved that level of writing that has emoted so much of it. And I do hope that when you all read it, you all cry. I mean, it sounds really, really bad, but...
yeah, she's just like all...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little sadistic, but that's just what... It's emotional connection, and that's... So my first book was a fantasy novel, and then I kind of realized that I write better when I'm actually emoting, when I'm trying to connect with the audience and talking about emotions and feelings and relationships, and that was this book.
So when I wrote Nikhil and Riya, which is also set in a school, which is also about 16, 17-year-olds, I had to reach back into my past and pull out those memories of a time which was 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So what are some of the issues today that you think are very pertinent, that maybe everyone needs to know about, that teens go through, that maybe you can't, that you wish adults knew, that you wish you could maybe talk to your parents about, or I don't know, maybe, or you could talk to adults about. So what are some of those sort of key issues that a teenager wants every single adult to know?
Well, one of the things I think which we already touched upon was that there's really not, like we said, that at school it actually makes you dislike writing and reading, which I think is one of the things we already kind of, raged about in complete sort of irritation, which is another reason that I think why a lot of kids our age might not be writing and reading as much as before. A lot of schools are like, oh, they spend too much time on social media, and yes, we do, but it can't just be Snapchat that's causing us to not read. I think that also in school it would help if there was more like out of the syllabus reading, or just like reading as in your opinion is right, no matter what. Admittedly, it would be kind of tough to grade, but then just give everyone 100%.
Let's give everyone 100%, perfect.
So I feel really strongly about this because I'm 17 and I have a lot of issues at home about this. So first of all, I think adults need to understand that teenagers need a little privacy. Okay, there's no need to know every aspect of our lives. You brought us up, like at least till 17. Like the thing I tell my parents is, you brought me up till 17. So have enough faith in your parenting to know that I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay? Thanks guys. And the second thing is, just let us make our own mistakes. I think I would honestly learn better that way. Because if I make a mistake, despite you telling me 100 times not to do something, then okay, you can tell me told you so, and at least to avoid that told you so in the future, I won't make that mistake again. So just let us make our mistakes, okay? And we are not so bad. Teenagers as a species are considered to be terrible. Like, we really aren't.
I think teenage girls are better than teenage boys.
No, but it's ridiculous. It's like at 17, okay, we need to know everything you're doing. You're still a baby. Don't try to take on adult responsibilities. At 18, great, leave the house. You're ready now.
Exactly. So
have you guys ever threatened to leave the house? Because now that we're best-selling authors, we're published, we're going to leave the house.
Not
we're
even
going to move out.
My brother, he's 18, he won't leave our room. He won't leave the room. I'm like, why don't you take the room downstairs? No. He's 18 and he's trying to be a cricket player. So, and he still shares a room with his younger sister. So.
No,
what about you? Have you had a walkout saying, I'm published, I have royalties, I'm moving out?
I wish my parents gave me these privileges. It's more like I still have to wipe the table once we're done with the food. I still have to keep my room clean. I still have to go to sleep at like 11, okay, because my mom tells me, why? If I'm doing what an adult usually does.
You're writing at night, from 11 to 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I usually love writing, because my mom can't say anything. My dad's on my side, like, let her write. And my mom's like, why though? Can't she get up in the morning? Like, I'm sure you would love if I was like Zuni getting up at 6 o'clock.
Well, yeah. And this is another thing. This sounds really small, but I'm pretty sure any teenager in the audience will know what I'm talking about. If you say it once, I've heard you. I know.
Yeah.
You don't. Let's just be like I can have a headphone in, but
I think we're getting a lot of parenting tips at this session. It's some very, very wise parenting tips. So parents, please take note.
It's crazy.
How to deal with teenagers.
Like 5 minutes later, you heard that, right? Yes, I heard it. Finally, I'll get up and do it like 3 hours before I'm supposed to, just so that it's done.
Yeah.
So we're coming to sort of the end. We're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions. We have about 10 more minutes for all of us to talk. What tips would you give to young aspiring writers? So I'm sure there's many people out here in the audience. They want to write. Actually, after this session, I'm beginning to think this whole writer's block thing. these guys don't seem to be blocked at all. At this age. So I'm beginning to feel that as adult writers, that's sort of all in our heads.
I would say like two things. The first thing is that yes, you're going to have writer's block, but I think if the harder it gets to write, the more you should keep going on that day. Like if it feels like I'm never going to get anything done, just write. Write 1,000 pages of nonsense, but at least it's written. At least it's there. Like write 10 pages of all work and no play over and over again, but at least you've written it. At least it's there. So that would be the first thing. And I guess the second thing was, right now I sound like really disciplined, like, oh, I wake up at 6 and I do this and I do that and foo. But I'm really not that disciplined at all. So if someone as lazy as me can do it, then you can definitely do it. Just don't think. I mean, even if you're being lazy, if you care about it enough, it'll get done.
Wow, she's saying she's lazy.
I
Okay,
really am. I come home and like for an hour, I'm just like, what were you doing? I was eating a snack. Like I'm not disciplined at all.
she eats a snack for 1 hour. She calls herself undisciplined.
So for about writer's block, so I have this one method that I always used to get rid of it, and that's just reading. Because when I see other people, my favorite authors writing so well, I just feel like, oh, I wish I had written that, and then it comes back. So I think that's a really good method of getting over writer's block. And also, I really, really strongly believe that you don't have to be great at writing if you want to write a book, or
True.
I don't mean it like you don't have to be good at writing. I mean that you don't have to have a great vocabulary to write it. As long as you're good at storytelling and you can get your point across, because it doesn't mean that you have to use big words in order to emote.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
So
even
if you're-
Hemingway wrote just 6 words.
Yeah. So if it's all about passion, and also exactly like she said, if you care about it enough, you will get it done.
Yeah.
So coming back to your parents, Anusha, your father is a writer. Your father's also a banker.
Yeah.
So how much do you read his work? Do you read his books? Is that an inspiration for you, or is it just not really? He's
No.
not easy in the audience.
No, he's not.
Okay,
He's
good.
not.
So
Okay, we
He
can
is
speak freely.
candid.
He is an inspiration to me, but I've not read his works
Okay, she hasn't read her
because
parents.
he won't let me read
Where's
his
Dad?
books.
I'm
Who's
gonna
that?
look at
Yeah.
Dad in the audience because he's always telling me, you have seen none of my movies. Have you seen? Have you seen?
And now coming back
But
to
he lets
Zuni.
you see it, like it's your my dad won't let me read
I
his books.
wasn't born yet. And he's like, have you seen it?
So, Zuni's parents are both writers. Veenu Vinod Chopra is a film writer and producer, and her mother also writes about film. So, how many do you watch their films? Do you read their books? Is that inspiration for you?
I mean, once again, in his mind, no. but I guess it's definitely really helpful to come from a family of creative artists. Because in school, like people are like, oh, my parents forced me to take ad math, forced me to take business. And I'm like, my parents want me to drop out of school and write. So
No, again, at this point, I just want to make this comment that parents encouraging children to read in this day and age is so important. Reading and novels are still looked upon as a pastime. This is something that you're doing, which is a time pass, which is a waste of time. Go instead and go for your tuitions.
Yeah.
Go instead and study
Yeah.
for your exams. Make sure you get good grades and good marks. But even at, I look back at my high school career and I think to myself, I don't remember what marks I got. I really don't. I do remember the books I read though.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's what really marks my time in school. As both of these two have said, and I really hope that the young people out there, parents out there, will realize how important it is to encourage reading
Yeah,
and to
definitely.
encourage writing, which is again looked upon as a little bit of a soft career that
exactly.
you're never going to make it if you become a
choose
writer.
to do that. But I think for parents, like two things, like this is also, I'm partly saying this because I'm taking my mocks in 2 weeks. So, but I feel like first try to remember what you got in 10th grade, and like 80% of the time you probably won't remember. But if you do remember, was it that good? Really was it? Was it as good as you want your kids to be? Just things to think about, given that I have bio in 2 weeks.
So these two are also meeting for the first time today. Both of these young writers. So I want to know, I know you had a little bit of time to speak beforehand, but do you have any questions for each other? What kind of, is there something that you'd like to ask that
Well,
you would?
I mean, one thing I would say is that I definitely applaud the genre of the way in which you've written it, that it's 5 friends. I mean, for me, someone's like, so how did this happen? And I can be like, magic. You know what I mean? But you don't have that option. Magic is such a get out of jail free card. I love it.
But my first book was about it, and
Well, yeah,
I think
but-
that's why I wrote it on fantasy, because I didn't really need to think.
Yeah.
And that was just like anything that happens is magic.
Magic, right? But then a really great author once said that in fiction you'll find you can write whatever you can get away with, but unfortunately, you can't get away with very much. So I really like that. I mean, I'm really impressed that you wrote a book without any, like, it's real, you know, and it's really, you're literally getting people interested in their own lives, you know, which I think is amazing. So
I actually really like this style. I've not read any of her books, but what she read right now was, wow, like there's so much, you know, description in it, which is amazing, because if people can imagine what you're reading, then you're already there, quite honestly.
Okay, this is one last sort of kind of personal question. I think the parents should close their ears right now, okay? Zuni's parents in the audience. What about, but I'm going to ask it anyways because it's the question that I wonder about. When I look back at myself in 11th, 12th standard, the one thing that would play on my mind very much was love, was boys, you know? You're sort of, I see my younger brother, he's 17, and he has, okay, he's not here, thank God. He has a girlfriend, apparently, who he's never told me about, but I found out through other sources. And they're always on WhatsApp with each other, on Facebook with each other. He's supposed to be studying, instead he's sneaking messages. And, you know, even with Nikhil and Riya, it's about young love. It's about that intensity that you feel at 17 or 18 when you can think about nothing else. You know, it's the one overriding thing, you know, forget biology, forget history. It's all about that one other person that you fall for. So is that a distraction for you too? Okay, parents have closed their ears, you can be candid.
One thing to be clear with is that biology was already forgotten. It needed no more pressing. But see, the thing is, I would really love to answer your question and say that there's, you know, this amazing secret crush, but unfortunately, I mean, they're all rather dim in my class, unfortunately.
What about you?
So I'm that friend whose all other friends are in relationships.
So you're that anchor that people go to
so
for relationship advice.
Yeah, exactly.
You're that smart author who everyone wants to, you know, do their homework, go to relationship advice.
Yeah, so I'll be the one who's giving relationship advice while I'm single, and people listen to me for some reason. I have no idea why. And I just, yeah, the distraction thing you said, this is a bit like cheesy, but I don't think it would be if the other person knows what you're getting into too. Because I've seen my friends whose relationships have failed disastrously because of this, but also people whose grades have gone up because of this.
Is it?
Because
grades
you're with a
going
person to whom grades are important too. So kind of, it can go either way. It's a gamble.
So you sound kind of like my brother actually, because he's always, and he's a cricket player who's never had a girlfriend in his life and slurps his cereal every morning at the breakfast table. And people are calling him from relationship advice, and he always leaves the room as though like I would never be able to hear. Like he's walking out the door and I hear him go, "I think you're over texting, yeah." And I'm just like, ridiculous. So, and I think you're more like him, but at least you're kind to people. I'm over here like, really? She thought that was a good idea? Like, so I'm very judgy when I have nothing to be judgy about. I mean, it's not like I've got like,
I judge a lot. My friends don't know that. But
not yet, but I'm sure every single boy, at least out here, must have crushes on both of them. We need to get these girls security getting out of here.
You would be the first. You would be the first, but thank you.
Okay, so now we have 15 minutes. I'm going to open it up to the audience. I'm sure there's many, many pressing questions here. So ask away.
My name is Maulik. I have one question. Nowadays, we're like English is a subject which people think is very easy. I'm like, English, oh, very easy. Then I end up getting 20 out of 30 or something.
Yeah.
So what would you like to say about that?
Well, it is a really difficult subject, and it's always been more difficult for me because of word count.
God.
It is a much tougher subject than people assume. And I think now the unfortunate thing is that it's become a much more rigid subject, you know, and especially subjects like English and drama and art. I mean, it's a real privilege to be able to take those as courses now. But they're so rigid that I still think that if there was a bit more flexibility, then it would really become a subject that people enjoy rather than I before E except after C. By the way, that rule is not true, and I found that out the hard way. Just letting you know.
I also think that in English is in general harder because there are so many different styles of writing. So especially in school, if your teacher doesn't like you writing what you write, it becomes a little hard to score marks.
Yeah.
And like I've had marks cut in my essays because I've gone over my word count.
Yeah, all
which
the
is
time.
not why. Like I've written 50 words extra and you're going to cut 2 marks because my essay was good, but I went over the word
Occupational
count.
hazard.
50
You know,
words
going
extra.
over word count.
Yeah, mine are more like a couple thousand words. Anyways,
I think that's why I like writing because you can just go on and on.
You
Yeah.
Go on, you can write a novel this
Yeah.
thick.
Hi Anusha and Zuni.
Could you just, okay, there you go.
You
wait,
both,
where I still. Oh, okay.
you
Sorry.
both are fantastic. I mean, I've got 3 kids and I've brought my daughter to hear you. One thing I'd like you, what advice would you give to all these other kids? Like you said, they don't want to read, they don't want to write. Something to encourage them, something to just get it started.
Well, one thing would be that find a book that you like, not a book that everyone says is good, because they're not the same. I mean, this is an odd comparison, but it's almost like colleges. Like all kids are like, oh, I want to go like to Harvard, but the only thing that they know about it is that it's Harvard, not that it's right for them. So it's kind of the same with books. I mean, if you don't want to read The Great Gatsby, then you don't have to read it because it's like, oh, I didn't like The Great Gatsby, then that means I don't like books. There's a book that's right for you out there somewhere, so you just have to find that book and not, go, of course, like get feedback. If everyone's saying it's rubbish, then like maybe think twice. But if you don't have to go by the words of the majority when it comes to books. So that would be one thing I would say.
We have this young lady. Could we get her a mic right here?
Hello.
Okay, sorry.
Hello. It was really an enlightening session, like especially for youngsters like us who are aspiring to be writers. My question to you is that what do you think the education system, what all changes do we require so that all the creative writers can come up and write like you guys are writing?
Nusha, do you want to take that?
Abolish word count,
Yes.
first of all. And second, don't force them to read.
Yeah.
Okay, like I honestly think that's something that even parents shouldn't do because when you're like 3 and 4 years old, they're stuffing you with books so you can, it's a competitive world. You need to. That's not why you're reading. So honestly, one of the most important things for me was that my parents wanted me to read because I liked it, and there was never a point where they said, do your homework and don't read. Okay, and I think that's honestly I think why both of us are here today. So encourage reading, but don't force it on them. And because I did ICSE, I really think they need to improve essay topics.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't introduce current affairs into English, okay, and just be like, okay, talk about the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. How are you supposed to get good writing skills? In IB, when I went for entrance exams and stuff, they gave you a list. So for people who are good at writing factually, there was one topic. For people who are good at writing like emotions, like I do, there was one topic. So you have to cater to the variety of styles. And also, third thing, I feel very strongly on this, like a lot of points.
Yeah.
And third thing is that moderate the papers. Okay, because the one person who's reading it might not like your writing, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you're bad at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so moderate the papers. I think that will really
And
help.
another thing I guess would be just in English literature, like there's so much analysis, which I mean it's literature, of course there would be, but I mean her, sometimes like her dress being red doesn't mean she's got angst and doesn't mean she was this and that. Maybe the dress was just red. So that would be another thing I would say.
One of the things that I would like to add here is that adding a little bit of sort of modern reading in coursework, stuff which is more contemporary, which people today can relate to as, versus Shakespeare all the time.
Yeah.
It can get a little dated. I think we do need, and if we introduce young people to things that are more current, that may actually encourage them to read more and encourage them to read more widely and not look upon reading as a task, which is some sort of homework, something that you have to do to get good marks.
They have this concept of like good books, right? Read only good books. What are good books? I mean, good books according to you, but they might not really be the actual thing.
Yeah.
We have a...
Hey, I'm Kwaish. So, firstly, great session out there.
Thank you.
My question to you is, like, has the problem of duplicating have you ever faced the problem of duplicating? Like, you wrote something really good, you're very impressed with it, and then when you sit back and read it, you're like, whoa, I have read that before, and you realize you've duplicated some author's work. So, like, What do you suggest for that?
Well, definitely more when I was younger, because I didn't really, at 9, I didn't really understand the concept of plagiarism. So I was like, well, that sounds great. I could do that, and just been like, so I would say just if you have any doubts about it at all, then you should really don't let it go if you have doubts. You know, if you think it's too close to another author, it's better to change it than keep it there and risk, you know, the whole integrity of your piece being, you know, sort of underestimated simply because that one line sounded too much like another author's. So yeah.
Hello. It was a great session. Since you have started writing so early, could I know that what triggered your interest into writing? But at your age, it was not necessary for you to start writing and these things. Did any incident or any particular thing triggered the whole thing, whole process?
Should you want to take that?
I think reading, of course, had me always interested in writing. But writing the book as such, I think it was triggered by the fact that my father was writing. So, okay, so to somebody outside the writing industry, it seems a very mysterious industry. Like you just have somebody who says they're writing and then the book is out. You know, so you don't really know what goes on in that middle stage. But since I was there when my father was writing, I could see what was happening. And so one day I just decided, okay, even I want to write, but no intentions of publishing, nothing. So I think I just started writing it like that. And then, so my first book was unpublished. I haven't published it because I found it so terrible. After that, I was like, no. So that time, so I took like around 2 years to write that because I was 8 or something. And by the time I finished that, I was like, okay, you know, I want to publish a book. And then I restarted and wrote another thing all over again. So I think that goes with the fact that my dad was an inspiration too, in many ways.
I would definitely second what you said about writing being a mysterious industry. Like, I remember I had a free period in school and I was reading The Art of Dramatic Writing, which my dad gave me, which is a great book, by the way. You should read it if you're aspiring to write. And my physics teacher walks by and she's like, hi, what are you reading? And I showed her and she's like, wow, so they have like books for this kind of thing? And I was like, yeah. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
In my case, when my book first came out, it was semi-autobiographical. It was based on my experiences in a beauty pageant. And I wrote my first book, and I never thought that I would go back to writing. As I told you earlier, I thought that at that time, I was very keen to have a career in investment banking. And I went to business school, and all of that. But every experience that I sort of accumulated, I sort of wanted to always write about it. So the heart of everything, that's what drew me. And then a few years later, I said, you know what, there's nothing better for me than writing.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, whether it's banking, whether it's a corporate career, I said, and so I literally one day in New York packed my bags, moved back and said, you know what, I'm going to do this for a few more years and see how it ends up. And well, so far so good.
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, goes back to the point of families being encouraging. If I hadn't had parents, my grandmother was a writer, and she wrote something like 50 books. So I think that subconscious effect of having someone who was writing books all the time, that effect of reading, you know, everyone in my family read, and there's rooms full of books. I think that was an influence. But a question to you, for you, it's been films. You've grown up around films,
I really have.
and films can be so. It's a tantalizing field, you know. It's very, very. It's glamorous. You know, the glitter drives you in. But you've. So hats off to you for sort of sticking to books. And do you see yourself going into that world, writing for films, or going into in that direction at all?
The thing is that I think in words. I don't really think in images much, and they're way more different than I think people would believe. And one thing that also really scares me about a playwright or somebody that writes films is that you don't know, like when I write something, I can see that's what you're going to read. It's right there. It's on my laptop screen. But for a filmmaker or somebody that is a playwright, they don't know what the final product is going to look like until they've said this is the final script. So that to me is really like, I don't think I could ever do that. And another thing is that people say that like books are like, you know, not as popular anymore. I mean, chains of bookstores are going extinct. But I mean, look at everyone that's here today. I mean, you're all here for books. So I think it's, you know, and now definitely I would prefer to stay in books.
So even I'm in IGCSE grade 10, and there's a huge problem I face in my class. So even I'm doing MOV. So the problem is I debate with my English teacher that I really like the character of Shylock. I want to write it in my paper.
Yeah.
The one who's checking it, he'll get it. Eventually, she's like, you dare write this, you will not get any marks, you'll fail. Why do you want to do that for your board exams?
Yeah.
I want to write. I really want to write like a book as well. But then she demotivates me so much. I even have like supportive parents, but like friends and the teachers. How do I deal with them?
Honestly, I'm still figuring that out, to be completely honest. But I think if you know that what you're doing is correct, then I would say, because marks really at the end of the day, what people forget is that it's not that important. I mean, at our school, we had one boy literally, I'm obviously not going to mention names, but in the bathroom, like sobbing because he got 99 in math instead of 100.
Yeah,
And
that
I was
happens.
like, you realize it's not that huge of a difference. And he was like, are you kidding? Maybe 98 and 99, there's not that much of a difference. But 99 100, there's a huge difference. I mean, imagine, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving. So I think that maybe as long as you don't get caught in by all the noise of marks and only one thing is right, and I would definitely say that whoever this teacher is, I mean, with all due respect, why? I mean, just if you're listening.
And I second that as well. You know, I really think that parents put so much pressure and emphasis on children to get good marks, but good marks don't make your life. You know,
They
it
really
doesn't-
don't.
It really don't, and I can say that many years later. So, are you guys good students, by the way? I'm sure you are. Given all of that,
I'm
but
trying.
Are
I'm
you
trying.
guys like sort of 100%?
Well, I will be a good student until the 6th of Feb rolls around and I give my first mock exam.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Like, as
Pretty
in,
good.
work ethics are strong.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I
But,
would say I'm pretty
Going
good.
back to that, it's just, so really parents out there in the audience, I hope you use these two as an inspiration to encourage your children to do other things.
Yeah.
And adding to your point, I'm in 11th right now, so and I did ICSE till 10th. And honestly, I went to a new school in 11th, so I went to Ambari in 11th, and nobody asked me what my 10th marks were. No one cares anymore, because it's like those. So you're doing all of this hard work for the 2 weeks that you get bragging rights that you did great.
Yeah.
And it's really not worth it sometimes. I've seen people have breakdowns. I've had meltdowns, and it's really upsetting to see how much marks make so much of a difference.
Yeah, and it's not even like people say that, probably, the majority would agree that Shylock is the villain, but I cannot be the only one here that actually really likes Shylock. So it's almost too rigid. I mean, you could put 100 different shapes of clay into the same mold and they'd all come out looking the same. So don't let that happen to you, is what I would say.
So unfortunately, we have run out of time now, but there is an author signing. I encourage everyone to buy both of these books. The House That Spoke by Zuni Chopra and Never Gone by Anusha Subramaniam. They're available in the bookstore. They're only $2.99 and I think maybe 250 rupees. Please encourage these young authors. Please buy their books. And another final word. I want to say thank you to Penguin Random House, the publishers. For publishing these books, for taking that risk. In this day and age, it's not easy, but that they've published both of these authors, that they've taken that risk. Thank you so much to the publishers for doing that and for encouraging young writers today. So thank you everyone for attending, and
Thank
you
you,
can catch
guys.
both of these young superstars at the book signing. Go buy their books and get them signed.